Tuesday, the third Tuesday of every month. This month, our topic is AI. And again, I've brought a guest to help me explain the topic. So, Andrew DeGood. Andrew's the co founder and CEO of Ask Bob, which we will talk about, Ask Bob AI. We'll get into what that product does. But we're really going to do an overview of what are we seeing out there from an AI product perspective? What do you need to know as a lender that you should be thinking about? Or if you haven't gotten started, we'll talk a little bit about how to get started, and maybe we'll even talk, some of what we heard from other vendors and lenders at a recent AI summit in Dallas. So we're talking AI because, of course, we are. Andrew, thanks for joining me.
Thanks, Jeremy, for having me on.
I appreciate it. This is definitely one of the hot topics. I find that even if you're not talking about AI, we are today because this is a show about product innovation and about product development. But even if you're not, I feel like it comes up in other conversations just as a question. Well, could AI do that?
Oh
Like
yeah,
whatever you're talking about, people ask. I don't know what your experience is co-founding an AI company, but I'm going to guess pretty similar.
yeah, it is, and it's the thing that I've found so fascinating to me about AI and what it's done to the landscape is in many ways, and there's good and bad from this, is it's turned everybody into a technologist, right?
Hmm.
So just like you said, like it comes up in conversations, and we even see this where, and I think this is a great thing, is we'll have people who are like, hey, can you do X, Y, Z? And we kind of chuckle sometimes because we're like, yeah, we totally can, and we also could have done that 6 years ago because
Right.
that's all machine learning, right? There's which technically is AI, but it's not generative AI, right? But I think it's great for the industry because I've been in the industry for over 20 years, and this is the first time where I feel like everybody in every organization is really truly looking at their processes and going, is that the best way to do it? Can I automate this? Is there a faster, better way for me to accomplish what I'm trying to accomplish?
Yeah, I love that. That's what we'll focus on today, which is are any of the tools that are out there right now helping people do what they need to do better, faster, and more efficiently? And we'll talk a little bit about like what the promise is of this technology. But you just said something that made me think, let's start with an intro because I think it might be helpful if you'd say, you know, I think of machine learning as pattern recognition. You
Yeah.
put through as many possible iterations of a thing as possible, and the computer learns all the different variations, what to look out for, and when to flag something that doesn't match the
Yes.
pattern. You just said that's different than AI. Can you just give us a quick intro of how you think about Gen AI, how you talk to your customers about Gen AI, and how our lenders should think about it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the easiest places to point to is actually chatbots, right? So we have what I kind of call old school chatbots, and what we're sort of seeing, and let's just be honest, this is sort of marketing speak to a degree, is now we're calling them knowledge agents, right? And I think it is actually important for the industry because I think it differentiates and people can kind of understand, okay, here's something new, right? And when you look at those old school chatbots, which quite frankly all of us hated, right? Nobody actually wanted to use it, and that's because everything was like an if then statement, right?
Hmm.
Like I don't know if anybody remembers, like you'd have chatbots where you would ask it a question. And then it would be like, maybe you're looking at one of these three articles, right? And it would, all it was doing was taking one keyword and then looking at this area and going, oh, okay, well, I think maybe you want to know about how to change your password, right? And so now it's gonna show you an article on how to change your password. Now what we're dealing with is the ability to pull in just, and mind you, you had to set all of that up, right?
Hmm.
It took a really long time to get all of those pieces together because again, think of it as a decisioning tree that you had to do. Now with modern day knowledge agents, you're able to take disparate information that is all across your organization, in multiple locations.
Hmm.
We have clients who store data in SharePoint, HubSpot, Google Drive, WordPress, oftentimes a combination of, two or three of those.
Hmm.
And so doing the old school machine learning is really, really difficult because it's
Yeah.
like, I don't even know where my employee handbook is. And then, oh God, I went and updated my employee handbook. How do I get that? Now I have to go back and update the tree, right? Whereas
Yep.
today with generative AI, you have the ability to search against that data, put it against the large language model, and get a very articulate response back. And the other thing is you can tailor that response,
Hmm.
right? So what you want to present to a borrower versus what you want to present to an LO versus what you want to present to an underwriter is going to look very, very different, right?
Hmm.
If you ask, do we do we take foreign national borrowers, right? As an
Right.
example, well, an underwriter wants a fairly verbose answer to that question. They want to
Yep.
understand what are all the little caveats around it. An LO probably just wants a yes or no, right?
Too
Like
weird only.
they may not want this, three
Sure.
paragraph explanation, around that. And so with prompt engineering, you have the ability now to deliver that information in different ways, but still have the same database of information.
Yeah, I love that. I think we'll talk a little bit more about this when we get into what AI can and can't do, what it is and isn't doing today. But what you just said is so powerful because I think this is what gets everybody all excited, which is you can contextualize what is going on for the person doing a task or a role or something like that. And when I think of like really old school technology like Encompass or something like that, we do have role-based technology. It's not new. A
Right.
processor sees a processor view, a loan officer sees a loan officer view, and under it's the same software, but you'd see the different view when you log in for your role, whatever's appropriate for the tasks you have, the milestones you have that day. What you're saying is just that times 1,000 because it's actually reading also like real-time cues about what question you're asking and giving you sort of contextualized answers. But fundamentally, we're still getting at the same principle, which is like give the right person the tools they need to do their job in that moment. It's just we're getting better at it. Is that
Exactly.
what I'm hearing?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. That's going to be super valuable. So with that, one of the things I thought would be funny, and I know you'll appreciate it, is I went out to a image creator and I said, "Is this you? Are you in the mortgage process? Not the customer, but the LO." So the prompt for this was literally a loan officer looking at an old school loan document and being confused. And in classic AI fashion, I got exactly what I asked for, plus a little creativity that I didn't ask
Was a
for,
third hand.
a third hand. And I was like, I'm keeping it. I could have updated it. It asked you, are there any errors you want to fix or whatever? And I was like, nope, two mismatching buttons and a third hand. That's all I need to show that life is difficult. So then I was like, what does approving a mortgage loan look like? And this guy is so in the old school,
We got
tele
much better on the second one.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's like I think of it as those like black and white commercials from telemarketing on TV or whatever. It's like, do you struggle with? And it's like, this could be you,
You.
approving mortgage loans all the time. Anyway, so these are AI generated images, but to be honest, that's mostly for jokes in LinkedIn, from what I can tell. What
But
we really want to
But
dig.
you
Oh, go
bring
ahead,
up a
please.
great point. Like I think that sets a great example, right? Is we talk about this often. Is there's basically three camps when it comes to AI, right? If you, and generally speaking, if you work in AI day to day, you have a very
Hmm.
good understanding of where the limitations are. You understand how good or how bad AI is. And then there's two other camps that are like polar opposites. And there's people who think like it's fairy dust and you can just do absolutely anything with it.
Yep.
With like, one afternoon of prompts, you're going to build an enterprise grade CRM. And
Yeah.
then, down at the bottom, you have the people who are very, very resistant to it and think, oh, it's riddled with mistakes. And oftentimes that's people who've just had a bad experience. and
Hmm.
don't necessarily understand what products operate in the high 80s for accuracy and what products, or better said, how you get a product to a 98, 99%, level
Yeah.
accuracy.
One of the things I noticed in Dallas at the AI summit, and I think we talked about this briefly, but I want to ask you it now. I think I haven't even have it on the agenda for a little bit later, but the question is, can I get started? Let's say I'm a loan officer, because that's actually the best example. Can I get started with my own ChatGPT? Can I get started with my own exploration of some of these AI tools on my own? Or am I subject to only being allowed to build, explore, use what my CTO or my company provides? Now, I know in your answer, it's like, well, it's going to be different at each company. So I'm going to ask you this instead. What did you hear from the industry, from your customers, and what should people be thinking about? Because there does seem to be a somewhat harmless exploration of ChatGPT or something, asking it questions, working with it as a personal assistant, maybe for your scheduling, or even with random other, mortgage rate questions about the Fed or, what happened today in the world, separate from your. But it doesn't seem like if I'm a compliance attorney or a CTO or even a CEO that I want all my people out there doing that. And
Right.
yet, we all do want to explore this and be curious. Did you hear anything, in the last couple of weeks that changed your mind? What are you advising people to do? How are we supposed to think about that?
Yeah, so for us, most of our clients are obviously large lenders, right? We deal with a lot
Hmm.
of correspondent wholesale, retail, um, from that perspective. So we can talk a little bit about that in a moment, but let's talk about what you just brought up, which is the broker, right? I've got the standalone individual, who's selling their loans, to Rocket or VistaPoint or whoever it may be, right? And what I would say is one, think about MPI, right? Like
Hmm.
we don't want to be sitting here and uploading borrower loan estimates into ChatGPT that's just like riddled with documentation. The one thing I will say that I've heard from the industry that I'm a little bit like is be a little bit careful about this idea that like, well, ChatGPT says they're not going to train their engine on my data, right?
Right. Yep.
This is the same company that is under lawsuits from the likes of the New York Times and lots of other publications for having stolen their data, right? So I
Yeah.
don't
So
know
we don't know
why.
yet is the
Like we
answer,
think
actually.
that this
Yeah.
terms of agreement, it's like, and that's a really hard thing for anybody to actually prove, is
Hmm.
that like, oh, I gave this data. So, I would be a little bit leery and just consider, okay, what I'm uploading into ChatGPT, am I comfortable with anyone and everyone seeing that information? I think that's a
Yep.
really good question to ask yourself. I
Yep.
think there are a lot of great uses of just, the basic ChatGPT Plus account.
Hmm.
And, you know, those can be everything from content creation, right,
Hmm.
to ideation, um, to, role playing. I don't hear as much about this anymore, but, I know some of the best CROs I know where they're leveraging it for their sales teams is using voice agents inside of ChatGPT. There's other platforms that you can do, and asking ChatGPT to play the role of someone. I've used it before where I'm like, I'm going to pitch my product to a CIO, play the other side of it and ask me
Yeah.
all the questions you
Yeah.
think would be asked, right? And evaluate my responses to those. Um, I hopefully nobody else has watched. I write my investor letter like every quarter. I
It's good at
literally
writing. Yes. Yeah.
GPT follows what's going on with my company, and I'm like, produce my investor letter for this quarter. It gets you 80% of the way there,
Yeah.
right? And I think that's one thing that's really clear, important for you to think about when you look at these tools. There's what are consumer available, easy to get to tools, right? Claude, Gemini, ChatGPT. And those
Hmm.
are all going to operate in that like mid to high 80s range. And it's the way you need to think about it. You're still going to have to add on, another 15%,
Hmm.
right? Another use is if you have your own website, ChatGPT will actually evaluate your website
Hmm.
and recommend changes to your website. We but that's actually the Ask Bob website a few months ago. I punched it into ChatGPT and asked it to evaluate
Yeah.
and change, and we changed our hero section and a lot of other copy based on feedback, that we got from there. So there are a lot of uses there.
Well, that's great. This is a perfect segue into who's using it, where, and when. So, couple caveats. One that you've already mentioned. I didn't dive into, content creation, marketing. There's a little bit of CRM we'll talk about here, especially with the point of sale. So I may update this slide to add at least CRM content, but that's another huge area and probably the safest area because you're getting that same kind of editorial feedback that you want. I was focusing on more of the core process
Hmm.
for mortgage, but you're exactly right. We could definitely add marketing and content creation in here. And I didn't add any of those, big consumer facing tools, but it does bring up a good question, which is, are you going to get your AI tools from embedded platforms you already use, or are you going to get it for a solution, a standalone solution? And so I'll just make the point, since I included their logo on this slide, and it's a good way to kick off this conversation, is Total Expert's a good example where I put them on here because you're getting your voice AI agent inside your existing, embedded in your platform. So you're not actually buying anything new from a new vendor. You're
Right.
expanding your AI capabilities through an existing vendor. I actually am predicting that's going to be more of where it goes. The voice AI section here, so the Flare Labs, the Castles, the Mova AIs, we're talking about companies here that mostly will make outbound calls for you in order to make sure somebody answers the phone, ask some preliminary questions, and transfer you over to an active banker. So Consumer Direct is using it straight away for things
Hmm.
like outbound sales to get a warm lead warmer or to reactivate cold leads. I talked to one founder of an AI company who struggles with the same catch 22 every vendor has always struggled with, which is I go into a new company and they ask me to prove the agent's capability by calling old dead leads or old cold leads, I should probably say. Um, and they're the hardest ones already. They're
Right.
old and cold for a reason. And so that's my shot to prove that my agent can work is to go after some lead that may not even be a lead anymore, but it's something nobody's calling on. So that's why I get the job. That's why I get the opportunity because
Right.
humans are too busy to call those leads. But those are leads. They're in our system. They're graded somehow, um, and so a lot of what is happening, I think, is that, to be honest, is call, try to get somebody on the phone, don't talk rates, warm them up. Hello, all right, looks like you called or put in your information. Can I put you in touch with Andrew? That is something we see probably the most of when I think of voice AI in the mortgage industry right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you definitely, and I think there's a ton of value there, right?
Hmm.
Like the ability for you to have triggers, right? Also that are built into these.
Yep.
I don't know a lot about the outbound, calling ones, but I have heard, some things about them, and the example being is if you've now got a system that's monitoring your prior book of business and you understand where your rates are for all of your prior closed loans, and that agent is now monitoring where rates are today, and all of a sudden you know that, oh, Jeremy closed with me last year at 7% and rates just dipped to 6.25, uh, instant outbound call, right? The
Yep.
reality is in the old days, you're just maybe not going to make those calls, right? Not to go off on a tangent, but I think we're about to see something big in the housing industry. This story didn't get as much news as possible, um, uh, or necessary, I guess. Um, but Warren Buffett just put in over $1 billion into housing stocks, like
Home
either
builders.
late last
Yep.
week or yesterday or something like that, right? And I'm one who like I believe in Warren Buffett. I don't think he has some magic 8 ball. I think the guy like just knows stuff, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so if we do all of a sudden see a pop, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
let's just talk crazy and say that the 10-year comes down significantly over the next couple of months and rates drop below 6.
Yeah.
There's no LO out there who is going to be able to make all the phone calls they need to make.
Right.
So now all of a sudden you have an agent that can start making all these calls and start queuing in what are hot leads rather than you spending all day, feverishly trying to get a hold of these people, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they can call as many, I mean, you can set those things up to call, as many times, as reasonable, obviously, from that
Yeah.
perspective. The other one though that you have up on here that I do want to touch on, and I think I'm a huge fan of, is Mova.
Yeah.
And Mova is a little bit different where they're actually reviewing inbound calls, right? So they are tracking all of the calls. I believe they also do email, and maybe text is also included in that. And the power that that tool brings to an organization to understand 100% of the conversations that are going on in your organization and to understand where coaching is needed. Um,
Yeah.
I think Prosperity is using them. And the really thing that was interesting hearing from them at the summit was the gentleman from Prosperity said they've invented new KPIs
Mm-hmm.
because they have information that they never had as an organization.
Yeah, I know a lot of sales leaders who run teams that they will sample call recordings, right? And they'll listen in on uh maybe they have a KPI as a leader to QC or listen in to call it 30 calls a week, 40 calls a week, whatever it is. This thing is doing 100% call
Right.
listening and coaching with tips. And the other reason, well, I put Move on here for two reasons, but one was just there's a QC aspect, there's a compliance aspect that's pretty strong. Like, are my people asking all the right things? I mean, it's down to the level of, you know, did you say the right script for requesting to pull credit? Did you say the right script for consent for different things? But then also, one of the things that got me from that presentation from Mova's demo was uh, you get your higher performing LOs and what works and what gets a yes or a consent or a go ahead or a rate lock or a loan application.
Right.
You take that and the machine feeds it to lower performing salespeople and says, this is working in your organization. So you actually have kind of a behind the scenes process improvement and sales improvement tool where better performing people in your organization are training the underperforming folks in your organization, and you didn't have to do anything. It didn't take your sales leaders time doing one-on-one coaching as much. They still have to do it, but
Right.
they have help. And I think, you know, a lot of what I'm seeing right now, if I had to summarize as we move into these couple of other categories, is a lot of it is that 80 to 85% assist that you're talking about. Like
Yeah.
you mentioned it when it came to writing and content creation and some of the other things you can use ChatGPT for personally. Well, that's actually what's going on here in many cases, right? You're still getting a loan officer on the phone. It's like, can I get a officer on the phone more efficiently, faster?
Yeah.
Can I, you know, I'm still meeting and coaching my team. Can I meet and coach my team with more information, more data, and new
Exactly.
KPIs?
Exactly.
I'll move into the underwriting space, right? Doc intake, data analysis, data intake and processing for underwriters and processors. I'm still doing it. I'm still underwriting. It's just, can I serve them up a picture that's actually more well formed? Maybe some of the calculations are done for the more complex files. Maybe it's actually helped flag things. Please dig in here. You should spend more time here. And so I think that's true of these categories, what about the knowledge management and data science aspects? Is that also the 80 to 85% assist? Is it
No.
like how do you
So now, yeah, you bring up a great point,
how
right?
do
Like
you
there's
think about these other
like,
categories like
and
analytics and knowledge
I'm
management?
not this is not a commentary on MOVA. I'm just using this as an example.
Sure.
So Peter, your product may be 99% accurate. I'm just using this as an example.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
exactly.
if I've got something that's listening to calls, right? If I've got something that's doing an outbound call to a client, and maybe that's not the greatest example. Let's just stick with the inbound calls. If MOVA operates at 85% accuracy, that's not an issue, right?
Yeah.
There's no real risk that we have
Yeah.
there, right?
Just to be really clear, hold on. I just want to clarify this real quick while
Yeah.
you're talking. I was actually talking about MOVA doing 85% of the tasks I
Oh
used
yeah,
to
no, no,
do.
no, no. But I'm talking about like when we get into like accuracy of the
Yeah.
AI itself, right?
Yeah, got it.
When we move into knowledge management, there's a couple of areas that we really look at this, from the ASBOB side,
Yep.
right? So you have what we sort of refer to as a general admin. And
Hmm.
this is someone who manages your HR information, your technology, right? Can help you with tech questions around your LOS, your POS, your PPE, whatever that looks like.
Yep.
It can be for a technology company, it can actually be a sales agent and it can
Hmm.
help with information. And then, where we've had a lot of our focus, in addition to those recently, has been around investor guidelines.
Hmm.
And really, how we got into investor guidelines was we had a wholesale correspondent lender who came to us, and they were like, "We can't find anybody who's doing more than call it 88 to 92% accuracy." Like they
Hmm.
tried to use GPT, right?
Yep.
And GPT just won't get you beyond, again, that 92%. And so they came to us and said, "Can you get us to 99% accuracy?" Which we did. It wasn't actually an easy problem. It was actually a pretty difficult problem to figure out.
Yeah.
But that's an example of where I can't get stuff wrong, right?
Yeah.
I can't tell you, I can't tell the LO that, oh, the max LTV on that DSCR loan is 85% when it's actually 75%,
Right.
right? And these are much more difficult areas that are associated to it, right? So you do need to step back, I think, when you're looking at and evaluating any of these tools and,
Yep.
and sort of ask yourself, am I okay with 85% here? Is this
Right.
just giving me lift and I have enough human in the loop, right, in order for to make up that remaining 15%? Then yeah, that's a great product and go that route.
Yeah.
If there's not as much of a human in the loop and we have to get to that 99%, then you need to evaluate that tool based on the 99%.
Yeah. When I was at Rocket Mortgage, we released a tool called Pathfinder, and we had a team of people go through and write natural language trails for everything in the guides. Fannie, Freddie, FHA, and it took years,
Right.
as you might imagine.
Yeah.
And literally, as that project came to a close and was launched and was being used by everybody, and when I say everybody, we released it internally to the kind of tool you're talking about. We released it to brokers, released it to real estate agents, and eventually released it to customers. So when you were in your Rocket Mortgage app or profile,
Hmm.
you could type in a question and it would follow the same rules and database and everything. So when AI really turned on and moved into the maturity or this beginning of the maturity that we're seeing now, you could just take that and upload it. So just a quick footnote, nobody has to go out and do that anymore, but I will say documenting your internal processes, documenting all that HR stuff, all those general admin things and having them somewhere is really valuable. Right? Documentation of your process to feed into a tool that is then going to make you more efficient and powerful, like an Ask Bob or whatever, is so critical. So if you don't have pinpoint documentation, that is something you can be doing because any tool you're going to partner with is just going to be even better if you can
Absolutely.
start it off as better. starting point.
There is two things that I want to notate that on that though
Please.
is for us on for Bob's knowledge agent, we track 100% of the questions and the answers given.
Yep.
We have designed our tool. You know, the worst word that was ever brought into AI, in my opinion, was this concept of hallucinations.
Oh,
And
right.
the model doesn't hallucinate. The model gets confused because it's been fed too much information, right?
Hmm.
I always use law as an example. ChatGPT is trained on every legal textbook, also every episode of Law and Order, and every John Grisham novel ever written. Like
Yeah.
it's going to get confused, right?
Right.
So the way that we do is we silo off all of your data. And if the question that gets asked can't be answered, based on the data available, we track that in the
Hmm.
background, right? So
Yeah.
then what happens is then we do a roll up, right, on a weekly or monthly basis. And we come back to you and we say, "Hey, just so you know, these 10 questions got asked last week and you don't have an answer anywhere in your documentation. You need to either create or update your documentation in
Yeah.
order to be able to answer these questions." So you can roll this out and we can help you to actually see where are your blind spots in your documentation. Because a lot of organizations don't even know where to start. Like they don't even necessarily understand.
Yep.
The other thing that I should recommend that I like to recommend for people is, and it's one of my favorite apps out there right now. It's called Granola AI, and you can literally sit there and have a conversation. You can set up a Zoom call, have Granola record the entire call, take the transcript, drop it into Gemini because it has the biggest context window, and ask it to write your policy and procedure based on your conversation.
Yeah.
Right? So rather than sitting there and spending hours typing it out, you can have an hour long conversation and boom, Gemini is going to produce it. Again, 90% you need
Has
to
to be
edit it,
reviewed. Right. Sure. Has
needs
to
to be
be
reviewed,
approved. Right. But
right? But
still.
now we've taken a project that tends to take weeks and we've
Hmm.
consolidated it into, a couple of hours,
Yep.
at absolute max.
Well, that's a great example. I think it also is a really nice segue because you said kind of the magic word, or the question that I get quite a lot, which is where do I start? And the joke I've been making since the AI summit is if I knew where to start, I'd already have addressed it even before AI. Like if I knew my process had a gap, if I knew I was not compliant, if I knew my people were doing something I didn't want them to do, we either already are or already were kind of addressing that. So how do I get started? So I don't know if you have um, insight that you would give lenders or just thinking it through. Where do we start?
So I think there's two things to it. I think the very first part is start having conversations, right? Go talk to people you know in the space who've been hyper focused on this, right?
Yeah.
It could be a consultant like Suhazel or somebody like
Hmm.
that.
Hmm.
But it could also be, one of the companies that you had up on the other side, right? A lot of us come from the mortgage industry, right?
Hmm.
Peter at Mova, spent, I think over a decade at Fannie Mae, right?
Hmm.
Diane Yu at Tidal Wave, came from Better.
Hmm.
I come from, the secondary market. My co-founder comes from, the front end originations
Hmm.
market. So, find a vendor who has that experience in the mortgage industry, or again, a consultant to just start having conversations, start to understand the landscape. The second piece of it is find a vendor who's doing free proof of concepts.
Hmm.
Sorry to plug us here. We do that.
Yeah, sure.
I know there are others who do it, but I think that's also a really good way to dip your toe in
Hmm.
without risk, right? I
Hmm.
wouldn't recommend to somebody who has absolutely no experience with AI, who is, maybe a smaller to mid-sized originator, for their first step in AI to be like AI underwriting, right? Or
Yeah.
an AI LOS. Like you're probably jumping a little bit too far down. And maybe we want to make it something that's a little bit easier for people to swallow on that front.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I think if you get people comfortable with, I guess this is how I would think about it, is find an area where you do have interest because if you have some people who are like, I'll give it a shot, right? Like I want to try it in my role. I think that also helps as well. It's interesting, I go back and forth on this because I don't want to assume that everybody has something going on internally with AI, but I also don't want to assume that people aren't doing anything. You know what I mean? Like
Oh yeah,
I,
100%.
and
Yeah.
so I think, where do I get started? If you haven't started anywhere at all, that we just went through it, I think that's a great call. And if you do have some interest, which I'm sure you do, people are like, should I be using this? Am I being left behind? The insecurity of like I'm missing out is strong. I think you'll find a really good pilot pretty easily. So this is good, great advice. So
Yeah.
then I have to ask the obvious next question, which is, this is going to save me a ton of money, right?
Yeah. So yes and no. Depends. It depends, right? I think you've got some products where the ROI may not be as obvious to you on day one, right?
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
I'm going to use Mova as a great example. Mova, there's clear cut ROI, but it's not going to show up on your books on day one, right?
Yeah.
You're going to get better LOs over time because the coaching is so much better. You're
Yep.
going to significantly reduce your regulatory risk, which that would be a whole nother podcast for us to talk about.
Yep.
But it is right. So you are reducing risk down a road. Something like our product with a knowledge agent, it's pretty much day one, right?
Hmm.
We've cut help desks. Generally speaking, most help desks get cut in about half. So
Hmm.
if you've got, 4 or 5 people on your help desk, we're going to reduce that down to about two.
Hmm.
The interesting thing we find is that all of our clients so far have just redeployed those people. Like they were so far behind in other areas that it was like it was very easy for them to look at it, and our product is literally pennies on the dollar for what they were spending.
Yep.
So that's a pretty instant and quick, ROI. But I think it is good for you to have those conversations with who you are, with who you are going to maybe proceed with, and understand, okay, what do you think as the vendor or the technology partner, what the ROI is going to be here, and really kind of push them on what the math is behind that.
Yeah, that I think that's exactly right. Is how do you want to approach it? And also, one of the things that lenders have been sold from a technology perspective for a long time is this is going to have tremendous ROI, and then it doesn't, or it isn't deployed in true partnership with the tech company, the vendor, and then it's like, now I'm just paying double. I got my people using a tool, they're not more efficient, and I have the tool. So I
Right.
do think architecture up front, just from a leadership level, to say, all right, here's what we're going to do, here's how we're going to measure it. We always give that advice, no matter what, AI or not. You got to be doing that with your partners. And so I think, obviously lenders are thinking about AI. Obviously, the questions are, can I use it? Should I just wait for my existing platforms to deliver it to me? Should I go do some exploration? We kind of talked through all of that. I think one of the things I brought up a moment ago is the FOMO. Is everyone else using this? Am I being left out?
Right. Right.
Is part of something else I hear a lot, and I kind of want to just end on this question, which is the other part of that we hear a lot is, it's moving so fast. Every 2 weeks it gets smarter. Every 2 weeks it's more capable. So by next year it's going to do bup up up. And you mentioned it at the outset, which is some people treat it like fairy dust.
Right.
And so in this, like, here's what it's going to be better at in 2 weeks or 2 months or 2 years, there's like a little bit of that fairy dust, but it feels to me, just in using it myself, that there's a little bit of reality in that too, that it is a very fast moving, capable technology. Can you just talk a little bit about, like, where are we going? How real is that evolution, and how should people be thinking about that?
Yeah, I definitely will probably get maybe some people who will not agree with me on what I'm about to say, but that's okay. I think we've actually hit a little bit of a plateau on LLMs.
Mm-hmm.
You really can look at the release of GPT-5. Now, GPT-5, in defense of OpenAI, was actually more of a user experience upgrade
Okay.
than a model upgrade. And what I mean by that is you no longer have to switch models, you no longer have to turn on and off, deep research. I know there's some people who don't like it. My co-founder went back to GPT-4. I love GPT-5 because I don't have to think about what model I want it to use, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's important for us to understand this promise of AGI in 2025 doesn't look like it's going to happen. That being said, there are some people who claim that we're already, at AGI from that
Yeah.
perspective. So I think number one, it's not moving as fast as people think. AI is still hard. Like it's still hard. Like, it's prompt engineering is not easy.
Right.
If you saw the prompts that are on the back end of Ask Bob, like they're massive.
Hmm.
I can't even understand them. Now I'm not an engineer, but there is a significant amount of engineering that goes into that. So it's definitely getting better. There's no question about it. We're continuing to see more use cases, um, but I I think someone once said to me, if you think you're behind in AI, you're exactly where you need to be,
Okay. Yeah.
right? Is
Yep.
at least you're thinking about it and you're having those conversations. So, and and I do want to do a quick plug on the New England Mortgage Bankers
Look at
conference.
this.
Oh, there we go. Wednesday,
Look at
September
that.
17th.
Thank you.
So we
Yes.
are going to dig into this a lot deeper. Myself, Chris Mace, at the lunch on Wednesday, we've got a fireside chat. We're talking about another important thing that we didn't have time to touch on here, but is build versus buy, right?
Hmm.
Because there's a lot of that conversation right now, like, oh, you got to build your own AI. You got to build your own AI.
And
Um,
when people say build, the funny part is they mean build on top of OpenAI, Gemini, or Claude because nobody's building AI truly. It's like, do you build your own enterprise tool on top of an existing, or do you buy something that someone else did that
and I
for
think
you?
this
But
is
that's just to be clear.
this
Yeah.
is a really, really important thing, and I think there was a little bit of confusion at the AI summit. Is caused by this is the one thing if I could not recommend more than anything for lenders is don't compare apples to oranges.
Yeah.
And here's what I mean by that is if you are a medium-sized regional lender with 250 employees, don't look at what UWM is doing.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
you just shouldn't. You're comparing yourself to, and I always say this, UWM is a technology company,
Yeah.
right? Who
Yeah.
who uses technology to get loans from brokers, right? It's brilliant. They have a huge team of incredibly intelligent human beings over there. But if you compare yourself against UWM, like you're always going to feel like you're behind,
Yeah.
right?
That's
So
right.
find your peers and have conversations with your peers and see what they're doing. I think the one thing I've seen, and I don't know about you as well, is the amount of camaraderie and sharing
Yeah.
that's going on in the industry is absolutely fantastic, right? So if
Great
you're
point.
going to the New England Mortgage Bankers
Yes.
Conference, find your peers who are in that same room and be like, hey, what are you guys doing with AI? I
And that
have a
is
feeling most people will share.
they should they'll track you down there. They'll track, the board members from the MMBA that worked on this, and I'll just give them a quick shout out. Michael Kelleher, Andrew, Eric Prue, Paul Bates. Like, this is where you see all a new agenda, all these people in the room, all the lenders, LOs, CEOs in a room talking. I think if you're not planning to attend Wednesday, you got to rethink that and get there Wednesday for this. It's going to be exactly that. So we're even this Tech Tuesday call. We're looking at go Wednesday. We're moving it a day next week or next month. Go to NEMBC. Go to NEMBC Tech Day. And in the meantime, if you have questions, reach out to me. If you'd like more information on some of the things we talked about, you can reach out to me always. Andrew will be there. Reach out to him. Reach out to Ask Bob and see his fireside chat talking about these things. So thank you, Andrew, for joining us, and can't wait to see you in
Yeah.
Newport.
One last thing I just want to add is
Yeah,
I'm also happy to talk to people who don't want to use our product. Like if you've already
great.
got a knowledge agent, if you've already built it, I don't I still am happy to talk to you just about AI and the landscape and answer questions. I think again it's important that all of us in the industry are supporting one another like on what our journey looks like over the next couple of years.
Well, thank you so much. It was great to have you, and we really appreciate the MMBA.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it, Jeremy.
Take care, Andrew.